And we are back. Welcome, one and all, to the Founder Insights podcast by Animoca Brands. My name is Rich Robinson, entrepreneur in residence at Animoca Brands. And please do that CLS, comment, like, subscribe below. Let's get going, shall we? We have a kick-ass gaming entrepreneur, an OG who has been through many, many cycles of just dev hell and live ops and optimizations. And he's brought all of that scabs and calluses and scar tissue like armor to the Web3 battle. And he is emerging victorious. Welcome to the pod from Viker Dan Beasley, everybody.
Good morning, Rich. Great to be here. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
I think I strive to be kind. You know, Gary Vee talks a lot about don't do any harm and also don't take any shit, but try to be kind along the way. But I wasn't being kind. I was actually being very, very real and just stating the truth. I was like, who are these guys? I met them before at NFT NYC, and it's something really interesting in that gaming is the most difficult consumer app that there is. It's really tough to crack that. So you have to bring all that skills experience to the table. Then you have to learn all of these new things in the Web3 world. And you guys have made that transition, I would say, rather deftly. And that's something I would like to peel back. Like, tell me about the latest, greatest, about what's going on right now. And then let's dig a little bit into the origin story and your hero's journey, please.
Yeah, sure. So where are we today? We are days away from the launch of Grapecoin. It's been 18 months in the making. We launched the NFTs back in May on OpenSea. We've had just the most amazing 6 months. We should never have been absolutely amazing. Yeah, let me tell you, we launched the NFTs at possibly the worst time you could ever launch an NFT collection. No volume, no hype, nothing in the market. But we were super confident with what we had and the proposition that we were going out with. And we've just managed to strike a chord with the degens. And in the last 6 months, we've just gone from strength to strength. Everything we've done has just seemed to strike a chord with people, and it's been phenomenal. And as I say, we're days away from Grapecoin launching across multiple exchanges. And I don't think I've ever worked so hard.
Wow, that's something, because you're definitely a game veteran, and that's if you've never worked so hard, then you're definitely reaching whole new heights. Man, congratulations! Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this Grapecoin launch, and I've been front row seat at the show, just packing away the popcorn, watching all of the drama and just trials, tribulations, and triumphs of the NFT. Like, tell us about some of that along the way, and tell us about sort of the gaming chops that you brought to this, and how that has come to bear.
Yeah, I mean, the vision that we've had for Grapes from the very start is to create a family-friendly global entertainment IP where the roots are in Web3, but it transcends Web3. Ben and I have come from, as you've mentioned, we come from the old school. 2003 was when I first got into mobile, and that was back in the days of Java games and ringtones delivered via shortcodes from newspaper adverts. Yeah, so I've seen it all. I've been there through all the different waves and the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations. But the one thing that we had consistently through our career is globally recognized IP. Ben was, leading the charge for Lara Croft, Final Fantasy. I worked on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, David Beckham, some amazing, Mr. Bean, some amazing global brands. And with Grapes, we wanted to do something which appealed up and down the ages. And we've managed to do something which has been, I think, quite unique. We've cracked, time poor, cash rich 40-year-old males who've kind of come into the ecosystem and they're just passing it around, spreading it to friends, family, children. And it's just going from strength to strength. And you know, that's something we've seen previously in our careers where you kind of get into one person in the family and then it just spreads like wildfire. You know, Angry Birds was a great inspiration for us. And and that's, you know, today, 15 years later, my kids are consuming Angry Birds via Netflix and they've got no ideas of the origins. They've got no idea that I paid 69p to play that game. And that's what we're trying to do at Grapes. And it seems to have really kind of cut through and struck a chord with the Web3 community.
Fantastic. You know, you talk about Angry Birds, and Rovio is the mothership there. And I know you know this, but a lot of people don't know that that game was such a phenomenon, but that was their 52nd game, and their 51 games that preceded that were not phenomenons. They were phenomenally bad. And they kept going until they actually cracked it. And then, man, you know, that Angry Birds movies, I've watched them with my kids. I have 3 kids. They're actually quite good. They've done a fantastic job at extending the IP, and they really took that core game and turned it into something. And it's really funny you say that, because I was talking about Grapes, and I feel like Web3 needs that. Like, where's the Web3 Angry Birds? Where's that really broad appeal that has something that can be built upon and expanded? And I think you've done it. You've done it well. You put the flag in the sand.
Thank you. And that's really been very core to our thinking the whole way through this is, you know, we sat on the sidelines, we bought into projects personally and learned and looked at what was working, what wasn't working. And Ben and I kind of came to the conclusion that at the time when we were kind of conceiving Grapes, we felt that a lot of the NFT projects were very masculine, quite heavy art styles. And there was a few projects, you know, if I go think about Cool Cats, it's very cute, family friendly. But at the time, there wasn't too many. There are more coming into it, but really that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to go mass appeal. We wanted to do something which was fun, colorful, vibrant, and you know, with all the things we've learned in our career, to win, it's going to be fun. You've got to have fun. The games have got to be entertaining. And I think, you know, that's something that we're trying to keep with everything that we do. Make it fun, make it engaging, and the rest will come.
Beautiful. I love that you use the word win, because you are in a battle, and it is absolutely just brutal battle, and you want to win. And I think sometimes some younger entrepreneurs, like, yeah, they'd like to win, but I don't know if they're really thinking about how am I really going to win this thing? What's the meta game that's around this? And I think you guys have made that transition well, used kind of all of your wiles and experience and network to be able to position this. Like tell us about this kind of like seeding of the ecosystem. Did that happen intentionally? Was that a little bit more organically and just kind of like took root and grew on its own? Or
we've always had a very clear vision of how we want to execute Grapes. Some people take the approach of having, you know, a single container app and then putting everything inside it, for example. That was never our intention. Our intention was always to produce a number of different games and build out a franchise. And, you know, we've got some very clear reasons for doing that. If you look at mobile gaming in particular, you know, there's many different categories and genres of gaming, and they don't all appeal to a single person. And we felt that if we went for a kind of single wrapper approach, we wouldn't have as much chance of success. And by producing different games using the same IP in different categories, we can constantly innovate. We can constantly try and reach new audiences. So it's been a very deliberate play. We do want to foster kind of cross-portfolio adoption as we move on and take people from one game to another. And there's some very obvious games which kind of feed into each other. But for us, you know, building out this wide and varied ecosystem, you know, we've started on mobile because that's our core background. But for 3 days' time, we're launching a full Roblox Grape Island experience and taking it into Roblox. Next year, is going to be incredible. We'll be in Steam. We'll be all over. We're going into lots of different places and just taking the Grapes IP across as many different platforms and arenas as possible. Absolutely core to the growth of what we're doing here at Grapes.
Fascinating. Your IP DNA really informs this strategy. And if you think about it, you would take Lara Croft, you would take Beckham, you would take, any of the, Angry Birds, and you would take that IP and bring them across games, bring them across merchandise, bring them across the movies, TVs, whatever else. And that makes total sense. But, and to break those down into NFTs so that they become something that's interoperable and something that has, provenance and ownership, that really makes a lot of sense. But it's actually, it seems it's a risk to be able to just launch it's almost like launching Angry Birds first before Angry Birds and just basically launching NFTs around just the birds and hoping that you can get people excited and then say, wow, now watch these games, the merch, the movies. And it's a really, in retrospect, it seems very logical. Like, oh, wow, you did it, right? But very, very smart and simple, but definitely not easy.
No, it hasn't been easy. Hasn't been easy at all. It's been a complete, I'm 20 odd years experience now in working in business and industry. And this has been a complete kind of culture shift for me personally to operate in a very, very different way. We made some very core decisions very quickly that Ben and I were going to put ourselves in the shop window. And, I think too many people historically in Web3 have kind of hidden behind PFPs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I've always put myself in the shop window. Whenever I've done business, meeting people face to face and getting up on stage, talking to people, I've done that my whole career. So for Web3, and our move with Grapes, we did that from the get-go. And that's really, really helped us as well, I think, in this journey. People can see us, they can hear us, they can see and feel the vision of what we've got. And kind of going first with the NFTs, we wanted to build a core audience of superfans. If you can mobilize a good group of superfans, and we've got tens of thousands of people there across our Twitters, Telegrams, Discords, etc. They will champion everything we do and help us take it out into the masses. And I think if you can mobilize that amount of people, it really helps you kind of start that cut through into the mainstream. And that's the next step for us.
Beautiful. Yeah. People talk about getting that core community and then having them help to inform and grow the whole, IP and shape of it, but to have them really accrue the value as everything grows. I mean, Angry Birds, Rovio, billions and billions of dollars in revenue. And we haven't seen that quite yet outside of PFP projects that, of course, Punks and, Apes and, Azuki, a few others, right? But within this really could be one of the first, if not kind of the, standard about how to actually create and accrue value across all the stakeholders. And then once we actually see that, that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And game industry changer. I heard that first. You heard that first there.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I hope this is a new, we want this to be a new way of doing business. I see this as I think for the gaming industry has been a very one-way street. It's studio makes games, pushes it out and tries to get as much value back from their players. This for us it's a much more two-way street of kind of creating the IP, growing the IP. The more successful we become, the more I can reward back the kind of core community, and they're on the journey with us. And I think they find it as exciting as we do. Our Discord, we've navigated it. It's completely open. We were completely anti kind of doing that in the first place.
I've been in there.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's absolutely
Yeah,
crazy.
it is.
But it's fantastic. And we've got holders who have been with us from the very, very start, and they're sitting on incredible returns, but they're still with us. They don't want to get out. They want to go with us on the journey.
And like, here's the thing is that we talk about it at Animoca Brands a lot, 3.4 billion gamers. And they're very, very comfortable with virtual items. And a lot of them are crypto holders, and they're so young, and they're so like, where's this value coming from for Web3? Like, it's already there. There's a gigantic rushing 5-grade torrent with hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue. And now, for the first time, we can really see. I mean, we saw it a little bit with Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity, but that was something that was not quite as sustainable. But I had Jiho on the podcast, and now they hit the reset button, and they're creating a platform. And I think that's also going to be super exciting in the future as well too. Of course, there's going to be multiple winners, but man, they're like the early adopters of grapes. Like, they're going to be shouting from the rooftops about how well they've done. And it's not just some sort of community that's all holding. Once you open up all these channels, Roblox, Steam, that mobile channel that how to monetize so well, then that's going to really show people like, oh, that's what it's meant for the value accruing across the whole platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're talking about right now is just the kind of digital aspects of grapes, and the ambitions for grapes extends far beyond just digital.
Can you share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're deep into planning for 2024 in terms of what grapes is going to look like in terms of physical, and where we're going to go with that. And obviously, the kind of one of the current metas is plushes and toys with the great work that they've been doing at Pudgy Penguins and Walmart, etc. And some other projects have kind of gone down that route as well. We may go down that route with plushes. I don't think that may not be the first place that we start, but we are already in the kind of later stages of concepts and planning and looking at tooling, etc. Because I want grapes and Ben wants grapes in your houses physically as well as digitally, and putting it into places and working with partners that can kind of supercharge what we're doing as well. And I think doing that again adds another layer of excitement for the community, and shows just how far we can take this.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about you and Ben's journey these last couple of decades, and what sort of led you to this big culture shift?
Yeah. So Ben and we first started working together in London in 2003 at a mobile tech startup. And that mobile tech startup, the most innovative thing they were doing were SMS shortcodes for Pop Idol. So you could vote people on and off talent competitions when they were going through the roof. And we've remained in touch. Our careers have kind of crossed at different points. We don't actually live too far away from each other. Our families are similar ages, so there's always been that kind of personal crossover as well. But he would say this, I would say that. We haven't been friends, but we've been acquaintances. And he went off to Square Enix, where he got the dream job. He did an indie game at the start of the growth of the iPhone. Did an indie game, and they approached him to do a publishing deal. As part of that publishing deal, he actually ended up becoming their global head of mobile and taking Final Fantasy, Lara Croft, Mini Ninjas, Championship Manager, taking them to mobile, free to play for the first time. So, I mean, like, when you talk about dream jobs, if you're into gaming, that's probably right up there. He did that for a number of years, built the London studio, the Montreal studio, the Copenhagen studio. I went off and started my mobile development agency and started to work with people like Endemol, Sony, and we started to take TV formats onto mobile for the first time. So Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Mr. Bean. At the time, I think he had over 1 billion fans on Facebook and was the biggest fictional character and the most exported TV show in the world ever. Fact. Um, and both he and I had huge success, 500 million plus downloads between us. And then we kind of got to this point where he was ready to do something kind of a bit smaller than Square. I was ready to stop kind of working for clients and wanted to go direct to consumer. And it was the perfect time for us to kind of come together and take everything that Ben had learned around game design and working within a massive studio, and everything that I'd got in terms of scaling and engaging with audiences. And we brought it together, and that was the right time for us.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful combo.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we complement each other really well. I know what he's good at. I know what he's weak at. He knows what I'm good at. I know, and he knows what I'm weak at. And we don't, although I'll tell him what I think the game should do, because everyone's a game designer, aren't they? That we tend to just kind of complement each other quite well and operate, very well as a duo.
How long has it been now?
Since 2019.
Wow. So you guys are very well acquainted with each other now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
You guys, yes.
Yeah. We've gone through, the COVID era, and we've come out of the COVID era and entered the Web3 era. So we've gone through a couple of iterations of our relationship already.
And tell us about that gear shift into Web3.
Yeah. So I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, I think, but, personally, Ben and I have been, trading little bits of crypto since 17, 18, I think it is. So we'd seen a little bit of the kind of culture around it, if you like. When we decided to really go full in on Web3, we made a very conscious decision to personally invest into different projects. Some were great, some were rugs, everything that you expect in the space. But we did that with the intention of trying to learn. And I think, the one thing that I've really learned is, I always look at kind of what's next and what people are doing and what I think I can learn from there and what I think I can add to it. So coming into Web3, we'd observed, we'd watched, but a massive kind of culture shift for me and Ben in the way that we do business. I mentioned earlier, put yourself in the shop window. Straight away we doxed ourselves and went very public and said, "This is us. You can check us out. You can see everything about us. We're on LinkedIn. We're on articles, all this kind of stuff." But that's been a very different way of operating. Web3 communities, they always want it today. And that's something we've had to learn to kind of deal with and make sure that we deliver what we say we're going to do. And again, I think there's too many false promises and too many false hopes delivered by founders in this space. And everything we've said we would do, we've done. And I think that's been a real key learning for us, is that you have to you have to do what you say you're going to do if you want to continue to build the trust, build the brand, and bring your community on the journey with you. That's been one of my key learnings through all of this.
Fantastic. Yeah, it seems very trite and simple, but it's so true.
It's so difficult to execute as well sometimes. It's so difficult.
It is. And you didn't have that kind of like maybe after a game launch and there was a patch or an upgrade or maybe some kind of, new type of game that was coming out, the community would be tough around the developer. But this is really a completely different animal. It's like you have your community of players, you have all your investors, you have all of your kind of like the press as well too, and you have some other kind of like Web3 layer of intensity, slathered across that. So the community really does fuel things, but man, they are definitely, talk about fuel, that fuel can catch fire and be really, really burn you. Right. So you have to basically, you really, really have to like deftly maneuver around it and make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you do. But you have to live it as well. I think that's what I've found is that, I'm in Discord, multiple times every day. I'm active on Twitter. I've got, holders have got my Telegram. I'm accountable. And I think that has made a real difference. It poses lots of challenges, personally. When you're getting messages and you're on Discord at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night and you've got a young family, etc. It is a very different way of doing business, but we've just had to do it. To be a success, I think we just had to throw ourselves fully into it and absolutely commit.
Love it. Fantastic. What are some of the other lessons that you've learned kind of along the way, moving into this brave new Web3 world?
I mean, for me, being authentic has been absolutely key to it. I haven't tried to adopt some persona of a person that I'm not. I'm too old to do that. I can only be me. And I think I've just had to, that's been one of the key learnings for me, is just being authentic and backing myself. But those are the two things. Having conviction. Sometimes, along the way, we've made announcements, we've put things out which not everybody likes. And at those points, you could kind of pull back and change direction. And I think, that there is this balance in Web3 of the community wants you to do X, but sometimes you have to do what you know and what you believe is right. And, staying true to your convictions, staying true to the convictions that you've got, again, has been something that we've been quite strong with as part of this journey.
Fantastic. I'd like to peel back that authenticity, because you really, open something up. It's not just about being transparent, because I'm not doxed. I am who I am, but you're really engaging in a way that's really your true self, and you're creating these relationships. So, I teach a course on entrepreneurship, and I had the founder of a company called Youku, which is like the YouTube of China. And he told a story, which was he made sure he flew his board in on a Thursday night to have a board meeting in another city. And they had dinner on Thursday night, board meeting all day Friday. And then every Saturday they would go golfing or they would do something else. And he said it took them years and years and years, but they built relationships with each other and they built relationships with him. And finally, he sold the company for billions to Alibaba, and it all worked out, right? But building that relationship, because in a way, the other part that I forgot to add, in addition to the community being your biggest advocates and your players and your PR company and your shareholders, they're also your board in many ways as well too, eventually with governance tokens and the way they vote. So, having that relationship, that authenticity is not, a nice to have. It's a need to have. You really have to be very vulnerable and true and just connected to the community. And in some ways, a lot of people are not ready to do that. Like the people that have the skill set that you have to be able to build the games well, probably just couldn't be bothered or don't want to get involved in that, right? So it's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's it's not easy to kind of open yourself up in that way when you're used to operating in a kind of Web 2 kind of 2.0 kind of world where you'd meet your shareholders every quarter, you'd put a PowerPoint up and you'd talk them through the highlights and the lowlights, and that was the way that and the way that I've done business for 20 years. So to kind of change and to do it like this.
And the community was kind of handled by support. And, once in a while you might talk to a, gamer to get some information, but it wasn't like we weren't chatting with them at 11 PM on a Saturday.
No, you're not. Yeah. And I think, we have done a really good job of, as I say, being authentic, building those relationships. Our community understands that we're very focused, we're very driven. We want to make this into an absolutely phenomenal global IP. But at the same time, they understand us as humans, and they get our humor, they get the fun side of us.
Mm. Can you share an example of that? Because I think that's something that I feel like humor is something that is one of the best ways for people to connect. but I feel like it's so missing in companies, and especially, and it's a little bit tricky and it's a little bit scary and it can kind of go wrong. But I can tell that you have a good sense of humor from talking to you, right? And it's part of your being, and that's another unfair advantage that you have in a way. It's like I'm going to be myself, but I'm going to connect with you. Can you share something?
Yeah, a really good example is, Ben and I will go into our Discord frequently, and we'll go in together, and we'll kind of riff off each other. And Ben and I have got a very good kind of relationship in terms of the humor. It's a very similar level. But we've done that, we've done it from the start on our Discord AMAs, our Twitter Spaces. So people within the community have actually heard the kind of the banter, horrible word, but they've heard that between us.
No, it's beautiful. The repartee, right? Like if you listen to the All In podcast, there's like 4 guys and they're all kind of like giving each other a hard time and self-deprecating, but you can tell they love and respect each other, but it's like so entertaining. And then you feel like you're a part of that.
Yeah. And I think that's what we've done. I mean, there was a great, actually, I think back to, it was probably June or July time. Ben went away for a week in Italy, and we did the AMA on the Friday afternoon, and he was like bigging up the fact that he got a week off, and that, he was making a bit of fun and big deal of it. Anyway, he's away in Italy, and I think we went from 0.5 to 1 east, and it just pumped whilst he was away. And it was just buzzing because everyone was like, Ben just needs to go away. And Ben's in Discord, he pops up. I was like, you need to come in. And he comes in and pops into Discord. And he's like, guys, this is what happens when I go away. Everyone's just like, stay in Italy. And right now, I mean, that joke kind of continues all the way through the community. It's like with the token launch that's coming up, it's like, is Ben going to be in Italy? So you're damn right he is.
That's got to be part of the treasury to just send Ben.
Yeah. Off you go, Sardinia.
Can we get Ben on the inaugural flight to Mars? I don't want this token to go to the moon. I want it to go to Mars, and I want Ben to go with it.
Absolutely. And there's a few of these moments where the humor and the fun side have kind of come through, and they've stuck as moments, and people refer back to them. And I think people love those moments in life, whether it's birthdays or special holidays or events, etc. And that's kind of that's happened not by design, by accident, but it's for the benefit of what we're doing.
Yeah, it just comes out through your relationship with each other and your kind of like natural essence, and it's terrific. So that I was talking about you guys. I'm like, wow, like we need these veteran game developers to develop stuff, but can they actually figure out Web3? And that's or do they even want to? And like it's amazing. Like it's really I'm super excited. There's going to be 10 million MAU mobile game, and why can't it be you guys
and the rest? I mean, I want more than we want more than 10 million. Yeah.
Sure. But to crack that milestone in Web3, and then just keep going all the way to Mars.
Absolutely.
That's great. Excellent. Hey, Dan, I really appreciate you carving out the time. I'm pumped. I'm not investment advice, but I got whitelisted for the token Grapecoin, so I'm pretty psyched about that, and all the best with that, and to be continued.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Wow. Kaboom Town. I mean, come on. Those guys are absolute OG veterans in the mobile and gaming space. And I love what they've crafted and built up with this Grapes community. I'm really, really pumped to watch the future there. Please, CLS, comment, like, subscribe below, and we will see you at the next Founder Insights podcast by Animoca Brands. Thank you.
This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any opinions provided in this podcast reflect the views of the speakers only.